On this episode of Locked On Lightning, the Lightning are back to 500. Time to celebrate the little victories and the big ones. All that more. But first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for making us your first watch today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, as well as follow us on any audio platform, wherever this podcast is distributed in audio form. We are there, and go ahead to subscribe. Hit that notification button as well, so you are notified as soon as the newest episode drops. On this episode, we are celebrating the big victories and little victories. The Lightning, like I said, are back to the 500 mark. Still very much a little bit behind in the division. Still very early in the season. Lightning pick up a big win on Friday against their rivals in overtime. Florida Panthers winning that game 3-2, and then jumping right back into it the next night at home against, I guess, should we call them playoff rivals? Because these teams have played each other numerous times in the last couple of years. I guess they're playoff rivals. The New York Islanders haven't seen this team since the last game of the season. Last time these two teams played, it was a win, a come-from-behind win on the island for the Lightning. Steven Stamkos had a hat trick in that game. And a little bit of different story in that game. Braden Point finally got his first goals. Well, not his first goals this season, but still, I think it almost seemed as though he's been kind of quiet. But we'll get up to that in just a bit. So, yeah, don't forget to subscribe to the show. Let's talk about the Florida game. So, Lightning had 7 power plays in this game. And you know, if you're a listener of this show, let's talk the power plays real quick, because I still am shocked about this. The Lightning had 7 power plays to deal with in this game. It almost seems, though, if you've been listening to the show or now watching this show on YouTube for quite some time, it seems as though the Lightning never get the calls. They never get the calls. And, you know, there were some instances in this game where I felt like maybe the Lightning, it was a borderline. There were some calls in this game that went the Lightning's way. And I feel like that's the case with hockey in general, and that's why it's so frustrating when you see the refs call something the other way and they call this the other way, depending on the game and the situation and all that. And we see this obviously in more so in football and the NFL, but a lot of times the Lightning get these calls against them, and in this game we saw not so much the case for them. But you know what? The Lightning didn't really take advantage of this. I still think are very much lacking in the power play production. I'm not going to sit here and complain about their lack of production. 2 for 7 on the power play in this game. Especially when they win. You know, yes, ideally, when you have 7 power plays with a team that's good, and we've spoken about this on the Lightning, yeah, a little bit, not exactly your grandfather's Lightning, or in this case, I guess, maybe if you're a little late to the game, your best friend's Lightning. But the thing that really, and this does correlate, and I think on tomorrow's episode, we'll talk more about this, but if you look at the Florida game and then moving on to the Islander game, the one thing that is consistent, and I believe it was also in the Blue Jackets game, if I'm not, no, they weren't. It wasn't the Blue Jackets game. So really, this is the two, really the sample points, if I'm correct, that shows the common variable in these games is which led to the Lightning winning these 2 games, regardless of, you know, how close it was, or at times how far apart these 2 teams were in score. And really what it comes down to is the face-off percentage. I've spoken about it on this show numerous times, I'm willing to look past the shots on goal. I mean, the Lightning, I think, are on any given night good for about 30 shots on net. I think we could agree, depending on really who they're playing, but in the most part, the Lightning, even on a bad night or a slow night, are pretty good for about 27, 30 shots on net. I think that's a good number for them. I think that's pretty much where they average at anyway, in that range. Uh, the hits might differ a little bit. I think the Lightning are, for the most part, always um, the more physical team. The blocks, they always do really a fantastic job on. But the number that always sticks out in wins and losses, and not just this season, but really since we've been doing this show, has been the face-off percentage. And the Lightning really recently have been lacking in that number. And a large part of that has to do with the fact that Anthony Cirelli has not been able to skate this year, still waiting for him to come back from injury and surgery. So, maybe once he is back on the ice and able to skate and able to be more effective, we will see that number kind of get a little bit more of a bump. But, the Lightning really, I think when they have those two numbers up, when they have the blocking numbers, when they have the face-off percentage numbers up and I think the 50 mark is probably, I'm not expecting the Lightning to go out there and win 60% on the faceoff circle. That number is pretty, 57 was the number, was the percentage that they had the other night against the Islanders. And even that is an impressive number, I think, on any given night for any NHL team. So the fact that they were able to do it against a team who, the Islanders, they're what they may lack, and this is just me. Some other hockey fans might think it's a little bit, might think I'm a little overreaching here, maybe giving this team a little bit too much credit. But I believe, what the Islanders, and they're always, I feel, a good measuring stick. A team like the Islanders, a team like the Stars, two teams that Lightning fans who, if you've been following this team since the COVID bubble, you should be familiar with. Because given, the Lightning played Dallas in the Stanley Cup final in the bubble, and then subsequently was in the same division with them the following year in the shortened season. But what I'm trying to say is that these games, and I think I may have alluded to it in the last episode, may have not, but or the episodes prior. But whenever the Lightning are struggling, I always think, and I may have said this quite a bit last year because it is true, whenever the Lightning are struggling, it's always good, win or lose, to see them play against a team like this, like the Islanders, like a Dallas Stars, even a Montreal Canadiens, at times even an Ottawa Senators or Detroit Red Wings. Um, these are the kind of teams that I like the Lightning, regardless of if they're playing their best hockey at any point in time or really not doing it well or not playing well as what we saw leading up to the Florida game. I think that these games are just as important as the game that the Lightning had Friday night. I said going into that game that was one of the biggest games of the year. It was definitely a must win given where the Lightning were at that point in time in the season. Yes, still with the asterisk saying still very early in the season, but following up that win in overtime, I think going up against the Islanders the next night, that forces Tampa to not only continue their momentum, because we have spoken about it on this show numerous times, that the Lightning, following a big win such as the one that they had in overtime against Florida, sometimes lay an egg the next night. And a lot of times it has to do with not being disciplined, not playing or putting an emphasis on certain aspects of the game, such as the faceoffs. And when you play a team like a New York Islanders, who, like I started to talk about, not on necessarily on the same level as Tampa, but will force you almost into all right, we have to play a 200-foot game. and we've heard this speech numerous times from players and coaches throughout the NHL, not just from Tampa. We have to play a 200-foot game. But those are the games against the New York Islanders, like teams that the Lightning will be coming up against on the West Coast next week, which we will be talking about. Lightning played a very disciplined game, and that starts from the faceoff circle. So we'll be talking about their upcoming road trip. The Lightning go to the West Coast, which is always a daunting task for an Eastern Conference team. We'll talk about that early in the season, mind you. All of that, how the Lightning, what they have to deal with on this road trip, this early road trip to end the month of October. We'll talk about that. But first, I want to talk about our friends at SimpliSafe. Now, the numbers don't lie, people. They don't lie in hockey. They don't lie in sports. And they simply don't lie with our friends at SimpliSafe. Over the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen SimpliSafe home security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. I know because I use SimpliSafe in my own home. They protect you with cutting-edge security technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents. Who always have your back. Here's why I love it. They share, they have 24/7 professional monitoring. I mean, whenever I need them, whenever I have an issue, all I can do is pick up the phone, bang, they're right there. SimpliSafe's agents call you the moment a threat is detected and dispatch police or first responders in an emergency, even if you're not home. You go out, you have a great day, you forget to lock the door, bam, someone walks in and is stealing your stuff. Guess what? SimpliSafe is there to have your back. And they do this all even if you can't be reached. SimpliSafe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, smarter ways to detect your motion that only alert you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats at your home. So customize your perfect system in your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/LockedOnNHL. Save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and your first month free. Visit simplisafe.com/LockedOnNHL to learn more, because there is no safe like SimpliSafe. So getting back to the action, once again, we want to remind you to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit us up on our social media channels as well. If you're watching us on YouTube, the social media handles are down below. If you're listening to us on an audio platform, we are at LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. Give me a follow on my Twitter page at DenkyDank, DENKYD8NK. Love hearing from all of you. Love hearing all the comments, questions. Some of you slide in my DMs, concerns about this Lightning team. Is it too early in the season to worry about them? Is it, should we be worrying about certain players? And like I said last week, I thought that this Florida Panthers game was the biggest game of the year thus far. The first really must-win game that we've had all year. A 3-2 win in overtime, and then a 5-3 win the next night at home against the New York Islanders, putting the Lightning back up to 500. And just in time, as they will go to the West Coast. Now I'm recording this Monday night. They'll be playing on the West Coast tomorrow night, 10:30 start. So get your cup of coffee. Thank goodness there's only 2 West Coast games this week. And then we got ourselves a 4:30 start on Saturday in San Jose. So thankfully, we are not having another late one. And then the Lightning get a couple of days off, and we'll be back at home next Tuesday, 7 o'clock start against the Ottawa Senators. We're not talking about that just yet, because I somewhat enjoy the West Coast games, not because of the times, not personally because of the times, because I'm staying up and having to get up early the next day, where sometimes these games end at 1 o'clock, which maybe I'm being a little selfish here. I would wish the NHL, especially when there's East Coast teams on the West Coast, that maybe, I'm not saying let's have a 10:30 start, or actually a 7 o'clock start, because that's, my math is terrible. That's 4 o'clock on the West Coast. Maybe like an 8, maybe an 8 or 9 o'clock start. I'm perfectly fine with that. I think that is reasonable. Not too early for the West Coast. Um, Not too late for the East Coast, so you kind of have that big audience there, especially if it's a national game. But got teams, which I feel like West Coast teams are just, the difficulty playing them is a little bit more amped up because players are obviously tired. They will get a couple of days to, uh, or maybe a couple at least. By the time they get to San Jose, they will have a couple of days to acclimate to the West Coast time. But you know what, these guys, they have their routines to where it really shouldn't be that big of a deal at this point in time. So you're looking really, the Lightning are in a good spot right now, and really how much you want to read into the standings right now for the Pacific Division, because that's who they're playing. They're playing the Kings on Tuesday, Anaheim on Wednesday, and then, like I said, you have the Sharks on Saturday. But Los Angeles and Anaheim, back-to-back games. Now, these teams are combined for 9 points. Of course, Los Angeles is in the 4th spot, 3-4-0 with 6 points through 7 games. That puts them 4th in the Pacific Division behind Seattle. So, like I said, how you want to look at stats right now for these teams is entirely up to you. My opinion, I think at least Los Angeles and Anaheim are tough teams. A lot of people, when we do our Thursday ranking segment on Locked On NHL, and if you haven't listened to that already, please go ahead and listen. Me and my co-host on the national show, Chris Masilli of Locked On Avalanche, you may be familiar with him through our crossovers during the Stanley Cup final last year. We talk about the rankings. We evaluate all 32 teams as best we can in the span of a 30-minute show. These are two teams, Los Angeles and Anaheim, who I think have, the pieces. They're not going to be at the top of the division with Vegas and Calgary, but they're teams that are tough. They're grinders. They both have, in my opinion, still goaltenders who, may be at the back end of their careers to some extent. And I'm, of course, talking about Jonathan Quick and John Gibson. I still think these are guys that are very capable. If you don't bring your A game, if you're not doing the things that we have spoken about on this show quite a bit, that the Lightning have failed to do in some of their maybe uglier losses, these are goaltenders that are very capable of going out there and pitching a shutout. And that is something you don't want to do against these two teams. These are especially teams that I feel like the Lightning are still a lot better than. I think if for our YouTube listener watchers, or our YouTube audience, if I had to gauge uh, the Anaheim and Los Angeles, I would put them like right here, and then Tampa would be like right here. Now, how does that translate to words for our audio platform listeners? I would say, in terms of 1 to 10, if we're ranking these teams, I would say 1 out of 10, 1 being absolutely terrible and 10 being a undefeated team or a President's Trophy caliber team. I would say San Jose and Los Angeles right now are about a 4.5. I would view Tampa at about a 7.5. As much as I've killed these guys throughout the first, I guess, couple of weeks of the season, I still think Tampa, as top heavy as they are, should come out of, I'm not going to say that they're going to sweep their West Coast trip. That would be fantastic. I think those games are going to be very relatively close. I don't know about the San Jose game. I mean, a lot of people don't like San Jose. They're 2-6. Right in the same boat, pretty much. Statistically better, a point better than Anaheim. So, like I said, where you want to rank these teams thus far throughout the first couple of games of the season, first couple of weeks of the season, is entirely up to you. like I said, I think the Lightning should at least come out of this road trip 2-3. Uh, Ideally, you want them to come out with a sweep, collect all those points in regulation, come back home, and get ready for a division matchup against the Ottawa Senators. But yeah, these are teams that West Coast teams are just very. I view those road trips as a measuring stick for your team. Especially a road trip that could definitely give your team a ton of momentum. Especially the Lightning, especially after coming off two very tough games. And yes, even that game against the Islanders, in which they did put up 5 goals as opposed to the Islanders 3, I still think that was very much a tough game. The Lightning really grinded that out. They only had 26 shots in that game, so really had to do a lot physically to take control of those games. So yeah, if the Lightning could go into the West Coast and they could play safe and sound hockey and really stay with the basics, if they could take what they did in that Islanders game and bring that with them to the West Coast, if they're edging out 3-2, 4-3 games like that, I'll be fine. Especially if they're not getting a ton of shots off. If they're coming out of those games with maybe out of 5 chances, maybe 2 power play goals, I'm fine with that. I would like to see a little bit more of a variety in the goal scorers on this team, which we did see in the Islander game, which was good to see that. Like I said, we were able to see Braden Point get involved, Brandon Hagel involved, Corey Perry involved, Nick Paul with his first goal of the season, Alex Killorn with his first goal of the season as well. So you're starting to see a lot of other guys on this team really start to get things going, start to get on the board at least. I look at it, I think a player is a lot more and maybe this is just me. Yes, you always like to see players accumulate points, and that's phenomenal. I love it. But when you start to see guys get on the stat sheet in the goal department, I think that really relaxes things around your entire team and makes you overall in the offensive part of things an effective hockey team in the attacking zone. So wrapping things up here on the show, I just want to keep talking a little bit about the goal scoring on this team because it is very strange. I mean, listen, I spoke about this on the last episode. I am all for Steven Stamkos leading the league in goals right now. He is at 7 through 6 games, and that is phenomenal. I mean, listen, we all know he has the potential to be a top 5 goal scorer when he's healthy, and really he has made leaps and bounds, and I cannot stress that enough, leaps and bounds over the past couple of years to stay healthy, get his body right. And it paid off in a 100-point season last year for the first time in his career. And right now, listen, yes, I have stated many times throughout this episode that let's not play too much into the stats. But listen, you got to give credit where credit is due. The fact that he is leading the National Hockey League in goals right now with some of the names that are behind him, Artemi Panarin, David Pastrnak, Alex Tuch, Connor McDavid, Andrei Svechnikov. Uh, the fact that he's doing this at the level he is, at this point in his career and after everything that has come, you kind of have to take a step back and appreciate what he is doing. And not just as a Lightning fan, but as a hockey fan. So, hopefully he could continue that momentum. Didn't get a goal in the last game against the Islanders, but listen, he can't score every night. The guy is human still, but still has 7. That's still quite an accomplishment right now. Braden Point, like I said before, starting to see maybe a little bit of uptick. Maybe he could carry some momentum into these West Coast games. 4 goals in his last 6. That's fantastic. And then there's kind of a little bit of a drop off here, which I'm not too worried about right now. You have Corey Perry with 2, and then you have Killorn, Colton, Paul, and Hagel, as well as Foote, all with a goal. And then some names here, little bit of a concern thus far. I mean, not really a bit of a concern, but the name that obviously pops out that does not have a goal yet, and also a plus minus of -1 is Nikita Kucherov. Now, we all know it's coming. Not to sound cocky or take it for granted, But we all know the Nikita Kucherov goal blitz is going to come, whether it be on this West Coast trip or when they come back to Atmley for a couple of games. Yeah, I listen. We've seen this throughout the playoffs. We've spoken about it, and I kind of see this. And I was talking to someone about this the other day when they asked me, "Are you concerned at all that Nikita Kucherov has not scored a goal, but he's tallying up these points? He has 8 points. Obviously, all are assists." And my reaction was not really. I mean, Kucherov does a lot of things for himself. He creates a lot of space for himself. And, he's been a little bit unlucky with the way the puck has bounced, the way the other team has played him thus far throughout the season. And, even if he's not scoring goals, he's making the opposing goaltenders and defensemen think about it. You see it. And I kind of compare his game, or vice versa, really, because he's been in the league a little bit longer. But I compare him to what Artemi Panarin is doing in New York. Uh, Call me crazy. Yes, Kucherov obviously has a little bit more of the accolades, but if you watch these two guys play, they do a lot of the same things. And obviously they're, maybe that's the Russian connection. Maybe they were trained a certain way. But both guys who could create chances for themselves and kind of, you almost see this, and I kind of equate it to basketball guys who are just, kind of like, I always like to equate Nikita Kucherov to Steve Nash in the early 2000s, the way he was kind of just dribbling around defenses, finding opportunities for himself, finding opportunities and creating opportunities for his teammates. And so, yeah, even if, Steve Nash, even when he won his two MVPs, even when on nights he wasn't scoring 30, 40 goal, 30, 40 points, he was still having 15, sometimes, even more assists in a game. Obviously that may not entirely be accurate, but you get what I'm saying. And that's the same thing for Nikita Kucherov, is that, yeah, he's going to go through his phases where he's not going to score a goal in 5 games or 6 games, or, maybe score a goal here, and then we may not see him score for a couple of weeks, but he's still racking up the points. And as long as he's doing that and he's allowing his teammates to be productive and score goals and get going, I'm willing to be fine with that, because we all know, if history teaches us anything, and you could see it from the shortened seasons that Kucherov has had due to injury, is that he's always going to have a period of time where he's going to get going, where he's going to be scoring a fury of goals. And really that's what is going to be most valuable down the road, because we can't rely on Steven Stamkos or Braden Point to score every single night. And that's when Kucherov comes in, because he's going to be setting up the Killorns, the Perrys possibly on the power play, the Hagels. And he's also going to be chipping in 1 or 2 goals on any given night. And that is what makes him such a great player. And that's why it's so frustrating when you see him kind of play a little bit more with his emotions, get into stupid penalties, put his team, dig a little bit of a hole for his team. So, you know what? I'm not too worried about Nikita Kucherov right now. I think that this West Coast trip is going to be a big road trip for him. I would expect him to net. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the week, when we're talking on Monday's episode of next week, that Kucherov has picked up 3-4 goals by the end of the week, because these are the games. I think that now he's had a couple of days to kind of relax, kind of work on some things in practice, and I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to, now that he's starting to see some of his teammates start to get going, that's going to relieve maybe some pressure off of him, whether it be self-inflicted or from maybe, I don't know, maybe the conversations that are being had behind closed doors between him and his teammates or Coach John Cooper. So I'm super excited for this road trip. I think this is going to be even a bigger test for the Lightning than what we saw these back-to-back games on Friday and Saturday. And please go ahead and join us as we continue to talk about those games going forward in the week, as well as throughout the entire season. Because listen, Lightning got off to a slow start, but I still think obviously there's tons of hockey to be played for this team. And I think I would not be surprised in a couple of weeks if we are talking about them, seeing a little bit more of the Lightning of old, the Tampa Bay Lightning that we are used to. So that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.